And we do see the Queensland Premier David Crisafulli right there right now. Let's take it.
Well, it's 10 p.m. last night, just off the coast of the Bay Islands. Cyclone Alfred was a Category 2 until midnight when it was downgraded to a Category 1. At about 1 a.m. this morning, it crossed over Moreton Island, somewhere around about Tangalooma, and just over an hour ago, so around 6 a.m, the Category 1 system was downgraded to a tropical low. It remains as a low just off the coast near Bribie Island. Our message this morning to Queenslanders is firstly one of gratitude, and secondly is one to continue to watch because there are still significant challenges ahead for this event, and we'll outline what they are in a moment. Those four key challenges, waves, wind, rainfall and flooding, have been those four stages that different areas have worked through at different times. I want to start with wind. Overnight, we recorded some wind speeds, including 107 kilometres at the Gold Coast Seaway, 93 kilometres per hour at the Brisbane Airport and 85 kilometres per hour at Redcliffe. We have seen some damage to some buildings. We've seen the loss of a roof of one of the apartment buildings, one of the older buildings on the Gold Coast. We've had quite a few instances of trees falling on homes, cars and power lines. To waves, this is where the good news of this story is. As the system didn't cross the coast on high tide, those prospects of storm tide inundation, Queenslanders were spared from that. To have no homes reported still right now that have had storm tide inundation is really a tremendous result. We have seen some extreme erosion because of it on the beaches, and there'll be some considerable damage there, and we've spoken about what that looks like to some of the key infrastructure on the beaches, particularly on the Gold Coast. But the fact that we have avoided the storm tide surge is a great story in all of this. The big challenge in the next few days is rainfall. And in a moment, I'm going to ask Matt from the Bureau to unpack what that looks like. But just to give you an indication of what occurred in the past 19 hours, we've had 240 mils recorded at Springbrook, 200 millimetres at Tallebudra and 100 millimetres at Mount Cotton. The challenges now, flash flooding, creek rises, they remain a real prospect with some of the rainfall predicted in the days ahead. We have to be ready for that prospect. And with already swollen catchments, the risk of flash flooding remains. I'm asking Queenslanders to continue to stay vigilant and go onto the disaster.qld.gov.au website and have a look if your property is in one of those zones. Be careful on the roads. Do the little things to keep you and your family safe. I want to assure Queenslanders that because we prepared well for this event and because they prepared well for this event, we can now move our focus to the clean-up in the days, hours ahead. We've seen a tremendous response from people across such a large populated area of our state, a tremendous response. I want to turn to power outages because I know this is something that people are certainly focused on. We're currently approaching 250,000 homes without power. That's the single biggest loss we have seen in over a decade since Oswald. The work needed to reconnect that is significant, but the ability and the desire of the men and women who'll do it is without peer. And Queenslanders need to know that right now there are damage assessments being done and already crews are being mobilised to get that job done. I've spoken in the days leading up to this that we had pre-positioned 1,200 staff from Energex. They are out there ready to rumble. And there are 800 staff from the other end of the state, the Ergon network, who will be joining them. 250,000 homes without power is a massive task, but it's a massive task that they are up to. And I have every faith that in the days ahead, Queenslanders will see the result of the planning that's gone into this, but also the dedication to making sure that such an essential service is reconnected. There's a couple of key bits of infrastructure that remain a priority. The Gold Coast University Hospital remains without mains power. It has been running on generators, which is, of course was needed. But there are a number of other key bits of infrastructure where we need to urgently reattach power to. The water treatment plants at Mount Cotton and Alexandra Hills are without power. There are generators on site and staff are urgently attempting to reconnect those. And it is a race against the clock to try and do that in the minutes and hours ahead before those reservoirs run out of water. Now, I'm pleased to report the other 32 remain on and are working, but our focus is making sure that all 34 in that network continue, and I thank SEQ Water and all of the staff involved for that. I want to turn to where to from now. Queenslanders need to know there will be no daylight between the response and the recovery. We've promised that, we've done the work for it, and so too have the state. And because we've redeployed and made sure that we've pre-deployed, we have all hands on deck right now. Right now, there are crews from Energex, Council, SES, the Rural Fireys, Queensland Fire and Rescue. They are there standing ready in the field to do what needs to be done. And it is going to be a big task, but it's a task that we are up to and a task that Queenslanders will respond to. I want to finish with one final message to the people of the South East and indeed to everyone who has expressed great wishes from across the country. The first is one of thanks. I want to thank the way that the nation and indeed right across the state, people have looked and lent their love and support during a difficult time. I want to thank the people in a largely populated area, the vast majority of whom have never been through a cyclone before, and I can imagine would have been pretty daunting last night. Many with no power, wind and rain, and yet they did exactly what was needed. And I really want to thank people for the way that they handled this experience. Likewise, I want to thank the crews who are out there to see the job through, and that will occur. There remains a real risk of flooding in the days ahead, but this isn't anything that this part of the state hasn't dealt with before. It's a challenge that Queenslanders have risen to time and time again, and it's a challenge that they'll rise to yet again this time. And I have every faith in the days ahead. Despite those challenges, Queenslanders will continue to take this in their stride.